In the previous Exodus / Shemot study, we finished out the remainder of chapter 27, covering the pure oil olive. And in it, we discovered, by looking at the Hebrew meaning of words, ourselves in Messiah, and the process of what that means for his life and our life in him. And if you remember, John 1:4, it says, "In him was life, and the life was the light of men." We obtain our life with meaning by him and through the work in which he performed. Let's go back and look at Exodus 27:20, and it says, "Thou shalt command the children of Yasharel that they bring the pure oil olive beaten for the light, to cause the lamp to burn always." Now, this is a direct correlation to life being in him and it being the light of men. And I praise Yah for our Messiah, Yahushua Ha'Mashiach. Let's look at Psalms 34, 3-5, and it says, "Magnify Yahuah with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought Yahuah, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed." Now, unto Yahuah did the psalmist, in this case, Dawid, look and was not ashamed. The word there for ashamed, it is kafar or hafar, and it means to blush or be disappointed, brought to shame, or reproach. The point here is that David looks to Yahuah, and this shows a level of reverence or respect, a willingness to be and do what is acceptable to Yahuah. In return, he was lightened, and that word is nahar, which means to sparkle or emit light, be cheerful, flow. Now, nahar is spelled here with the noon, the hey, and the resh. And I'm going to give you a couple of possibilities of the breakdown for this. Number one, an heir revealed to the first ruler. Or number two, a son that looks to the first ruler. Or number three, the seed's breath in the first ruler. Remember, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. You know, for most of my life, excluding maybe the last 8 years or so, I have been afraid of death. As I pondered it, I thought possibly that maybe it was tied to my experience as a specific type of person and my experiences in life, and possibly my conditional upbringing as a specific type of person. If you cannot tell, I'm doing my best to talk around certain biased identifiers, such as race or color. Now, this fear I generally did not notice in other people's who had different experiences. And I realized after I woke up that I had been conditioned to fear. Remember, in him was life. To cut a people off from their culture, from their Elohim, is to effectively cut off their light, their comfort, their life in him. And truthfully, to succumb or to be subdued by that position gives one a reason to be fearful. It manifests itself, fear that is, in many ways. Question: when you first woke up and decided to wear your fringes or tzitzits out in public, how did you feel? What was your mindset when you walked out the door? Were you nervous? Was there anticipation of what people would think or say? Or were you proud? Did you feel special? I think a sense of pride in that situation is normal for all of us the first time. But I also believe there is a hint of anticipation as well. I believe that the first time we're cued in, anticipating the looks and the stares. And at the same time, we're hoping for the questions. Why? Because it grounds us back and gives us a sense of worth and purpose, a chance to push past the anticipation and stand boldly for what we know to be true. And this is a good thing. If you look back on Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and most of our forefathers, and even our imams, they never feared death. They embraced it, expected it. I would not say that they looked forward to it, because that would mean they understood it to be an end. And if you remember from the last lesson, the end of a thing is not a Hebrew concept. No, they looked beyond it with joy, gladness, and expectation. Let's look at John 8, 54 through 56. It says, Yahusha answered, if I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father that honoreth me, of whom ye say that he is your Elohim. Yet ye have not known him, but I know him. And if I should say, I know him not, I shall be a liar like unto you. But I know him and keep his saying. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. Remember, in him was life. Most of our ancestors were able to look beyond death and be glad, because every part of their being was tied to resting in and adhering to the commands of Yahuah. Every aspect of their life, every conversation, every visitation, vision, or dream, every breath they took, they understood and they took in him. Now, I've come to become less fearful of death. Now, I would be a liar if I said that fear was totally eradicated in me. However, it does not cause the same fear and trepidation as it once did. It does not consume me. Now, the cure for fear is to fear the one that is able to destroy the body and ruach. That fear pushes you to obedience and prayerfully life in him. Let's look at Romans 1:16, and it says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Mashiach, for it is the power of Elohim unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Yahudi first, and also to the Greek. For us who believe and trust in Yahuah and our Messiah, Yahusha Ha'Mashiach, we should not have a reason to fear nor be ashamed. But let us look at that verse again in depth and take a little side quest. What it says is, for I am not ashamed of the basar of Mashiach, for it is the power of Elohim to preserve from harm everyone that trusts in him. You can see salvation means safety or to preserve from harm. Belief is to trust. Continuing on, it says to the Yahudim first, and also to the if you notice, that word does not want to come up in the Strongs. And most people would just move on from this, but this is being done intentionally to conceal the true definition from you. The word here in Greek is G1672, and it is Hellenist, or Helen. And it is not necessarily a Greek person per se. It means a Greek-speaking person, a Grecian, or Hellenist. With that understanding, anyone living in the land of, and that could be by choice or not, and or speaking the language, is considered a Hellenist, an inhabitant of Hellas. Or in this case, in the New Testament, it says Greek, or you could say Gentile. Let's look at Joel 3, and we're going to do verses 1 through 6. It says, "For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Yasharel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink. Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coast of Palestine? Will ye render me a recompense? And if you recompense me, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense upon your own head. Because ye have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly, pleasant things. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border." The prophet Yoel is Amorah, and that means to give utterance. He's giving utterance to the words of Yahuah here. In verse 1, Yahuah is saying that he is going to turn back the captivity of Judah, or Yehuda, and Jerusalem. That word bring in Hebrew is shub, and it means to turn back. Now, let me give you a little bit of insight into something. People see Judah and Jerusalem, and their mind thinks northern and southern tribes or kingdoms. Now, Jerusalem was originally located in the territory of Benjamin. If you can see this map, the little blue portion in the middle there where it says Benjamin, you'll see Jerusalem right there. Now, when the kingdom separated, Benjamin was aligned with and assimilated into Judah. Their territory became part of Judah, and thus Jerusalem became a part of Judah. You can see in the second map the kingdom of Judah and Jerusalem there. Now, Benjamin nor Jerusalem was ever located in, nor reckoned as part of the northern kingdom. When you see this, Judah and Jerusalem in this context, what it means is rule and authority, or rule and priesthood. Jerusalem being the ultimate location of Yahuwah's authority and his priesthood. This third map here is a map of Levitical cities, and it might be difficult to see, but you can see Judah in the teal. Jerusalem is right at the northern tip of it, and around it, it has like a star. Now, as I said, these are all Levitical cities. That star being around Jerusalem is telling you that it is the seat of authority for all the Levitical cities. Let's hop back to the text. Verse 2, Yahuah holds all nations responsible for the scattering of his heritage, his portion, his people, and the parting of the land. And in verse 3, he says, they have cast lots for his people, given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine. A Western mind sees harlot and automatically makes the definition sexual in nature. Remember, these are Yahuwah's words being spoken here by Yoel. Now, harlot in Hebrew is zanah, and it means to commit adultery and to fornicate. And you can see that rarely does it mean to commit rape. All right? Mostly the thought behind zanah means to be idolatrous or commit idolatry. So the boy in this instance is being forced or given into idolatry, which the Bible consistently equates to whoredom, and not into a perverse sexual situation like many minds would think when they see this passage. If that were the case, the wording here would be more along the lines of them knowing the boy. And that's a deeper scriptural breakdown for a later time. The girl being sold here for wine, on the other hand, is indeed sexual. If you notice, she is being sold for, or as if she was wine, for the purpose that they might drink, speaks to them partaking of or consuming / knowing the girl as if she were wine. Now, there is no better way to say this than to just be blunt, but this chapter, up to this point, is the process of turning a whore, which in this case is Judah, into a common housewife. Detach a people from their culture and heritage, introduce and encourage idolatry, and they will pretty much prostitute themselves. Now, verse 4, Yahuah calls out Tyre, Zidon, and Palestine for their confederacy and participation in the scattering and destruction of Judah. Zidon has always been located in the land known today as Lebanon. Tyre is also now a part of Lebanon. But before the split into the northern and southern kingdoms, Tyre was a part of a territory allotted to Asher. Now, when you see Palestine, some of you would probably consider that being a name for Israel as a whole, or Israel proper, or possibly the territories once inhabited by the Philistines. Maybe some would consider this to be Gaza and nowadays the West Bank, which is now inhabited by a people called the Palestinians. Now, the biblical word for Palestine and for Philistine is Peleshet, and it means rolling. Strong's also says that this is a region of Syria. And here is where it gets interesting. It is a fact that the Philistine / Palestinian people have always been in the area of Gaza. But Yahuah, via the prophet Yoel, is mentioning them in here in context with Tyre and Zidon, as if they are all in close proximity to each other. Now, Tyre and Zidon definitely are close to each other. So when mentioning Palestine here in this context should make it close to both of those places as well. The key is in the definition and history. Now, historically, any invading military east, west, and north of Israel wanting to capture it would need to invade it through its northern borders, passing through Tyre, Zidon, and Syria. The only exception is Egypt, which is south of Israel. Now, Babylon, Persia, the Medes, Assyrians, the Greeks, Romans, all invaded from the north for topographical and geographical reasons. Now, a good portion of the area now known as Syria at the time of Israel coming out of Egypt and before the taking of the land was known as Bashan. And Bashan encompassed an area that was east of Jericho and northward to include modern-day Damascus and the area of Gilead. It contained a city and an entire area that was also known to mean rolling. That city is Gilgal, which means wheel or rolling. It is my opinion that quite possibly the people in the area being spoken of as Palestine or Peleshet here in Yoel, quite possibly at this point were previous inhabitants of an area of Bashan, which is nowadays a disputed territory with numerous rolling hills and ancient fortifications known as the Golan Heights. Now, like I said, in ancient times, this area was Bashan and extended southward into modern-day Jordan. So, according to what we read or read, it would have included Peleshet and bordered Moab, Ammon, and Assyria. And a lot of times when you're reading throughout the text, you'll always see it say Moab or the deities of Moab, the deities of Ammon, the deities of Assyria, the deities of Palestine. They're always all mentioned together. And it's quite possible because they border each other. During the Babylonian invasion and the siege of Jerusalem that culminated in 70 AD, these locations are what both the Babylonians and the Romans took, and basically all of them, to invade Israel. The Aegeans or Grecians also took this route and came into what was then Canaan and populated this area, which is who the people of Peleshet or Philistines originate from. And in all instances, it was with the assistance of the people of Tyre, Zidon, and Syria, leading to what you see in verses 5 and 6, the carrying away of the gold and silver, the removal and scattering of Judah, and the selling them off unto the Grecians. Remember Romans 1:16? There was a lesson series that Goshen Group did called Your Testimony. That explains what I'm showing you more in depth. I'm simply just glossing over a few highlights. I would recommend you view those when available for a deeper understanding. But what the prophet Joel is showing you here is that there was a precedent established here that will give you understanding to what Paul is stating in Romans when he says to the Yahudim first, and also to the Grecian or Hellenist or Greek-speaking people. Now, someone out there is going to say, well, Paul was sent unto the Gentiles, and they would be correct, and also further establish the point. The original Grecians as we can see here in the definition, were descendants of Yavan. And Yavan is mentioned, or first mentioned, in the Table of Nations in Genesis 10. It says, the sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog and Madai and Yavan, and Tubal and Meshech and Taras, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz and Rapha, Togarmah, and the sons of Yavan, Elishah, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. Notice that the Gentiles were divided in their land. And also that we can see that from verse 5, their land is identified as the isles. Now, the isles is a reference to the areas in and around the Mediterranean Sea. More specifically, the Aegean and Ionian Seas, from which one would have access to all the locations that Paul visited and or was sent to. Rome, Corinth, Galatia, Ephesus, Philippi, Thessalonica, etc. So, was Paul sent unto the Gentiles? Yes, he was sent unto the isles. But the question you should be pondering is, unto who? Fun fact time. I mentioned briefly earlier about the invading armies into Israel throughout history. The Babylonian invasion was the initial capturing and scattering of the Yahudim. In fact, several historians note that a contingency of the Yahudim, more specifically, direct descendants of King Dawid, were sent by King Nebuchadnezzar unto the king of Spain and to other places as well. Now, if anyone knows, someone do me a favor and place in the chat for me the rough time period of the invasion by Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon into Judah. All right. It was around 600 to 597 BC. And I want you to remember that time frame. The Greek historian Herodotus, he writes that Lacedaemon or Lacedaemon was a king of an area known in antiquity as Laconia, named after himself, in the southeastern Peloponnesus. The main settlement of Laconia was on the banks of the Eurotas River, named after his wife, Eurotas. This settlement and the entire area became known later as Sparta. And we all know the Spartans, right? I assume most of us have seen the movie 300. By the way, does anyone know when that battle in 300, the Battle of Thermopylae, took place? It happened in 480 BC. And notice that the timing of this battle is after the expulsion of the Yahudim by Nebuchadnezzar. Now, here's a fun fact inside of the fun fact. King Leonidas was the king of Sparta during the Battle of Thermopylae. His co-ruler was King Leotychides. Does anyone know what the name Leonidas means? And I assume most of you don't. So allow me to assist. Leo is both the sign of, and it means lion. Ides in Greek and Ides in Latin means the 15th of the month. It later became synonymous with Julius Caesar in the reference, beware of the Ides of March. This is because Julius Caesar was killed on the 15th of March. What the Ides in Latin and Ides in Greek is actually referring to is the full moon. So Leonidas's name means lion of the full moon. His co-ruler, Leotychides, his name means family of the full moon, with the Leo in his name serving as a reference to which family? The family of the lion. What makes this interesting is Greek and Roman cultures, they did observe the moon, but for the most part, they were a solar worshiping society. He who has ears, let them hear. I'm just saying. Let's take a look at the first book of Maccabees. Chapter 12. Make it a little bit smaller. And we're going to do verses 6 to 11. It says, Jonathan the high priest and the elders of the nation and the priests and the other Yahudim unto the Lacedaemonians, their brethren, send greeting. There were letters sent in times past unto Anias the high priest from Darius, who reigned then among you, to signify that ye are our Akim, or brethren, as the copy here underwritten does specify. At which time Onias entreated the ambassador that was sent honorably and received the letters, wherein declaration was made of the league and friendship. Therefore, we also, albeit we need none of these things, that we have the Kodesh books of Scripture in our hands to comfort us, have nevertheless attempted to send unto you for the renewing of brotherhood and friendship, lest we should become strangers unto you altogether. For there is a long time past since ye sent to us. Where therefore, at all times without ceasing, both in our feast and other convenient days, do remember you in the sacrifices which we offer, and in our prayers, as reason is, and as it becometh us to think upon our Akim. And the response from this letter comes from Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, and it happens in verses 20 to 23. It says, Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Anias the high priest, greeting. It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Yahudim are Akim, and that they are of the stock of Abraham. Now, therefore, since this has come to our knowledge, ye should do well to write unto us of your prosperity. We do write back again to you that your cattle and goods are ours, and ours are yours. We do command, therefore, our ambassadors to make report unto you on this wise. Let's hop back over. And we're going to look at Isaiah 66, 18 through 20. It says, and I know their works and their thoughts, and it shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my esteem or glory. And I will set a sign among them, and I will send those that escape of them unto the nations, to Tarshish, Pul, and Lud, that draw the bow, to Tubal and Yavon, to the isles afar off, that have not heard my fame, neither have seen my esteem, and they shall declare my esteem among the Gentiles. And they shall bring all your Akim for an offering unto Yahuah out of all nations, upon horses, and in chariots, and in litters, and upon mules, and upon swift beasts, to my holy mountain Jerusalem. Saith Yahuah, as the children of Yasharel bring an offering in a clean vessel unto the house of Yahuah. Hallelujah. Was Paul, Barnabas, and others a sign among them? The passage here in Isaiah is speaking of a time and an additional time. We find when studying the word that many, if not most, events are a reoccurrence, or they're circular in their coming to pass. Now, maybe this isn't enough to give you an understanding of who Paul was actually sent to. So let's look at Acts 13, and we're going to do 1 through 5. It says, now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called a Christian, and that does say Christian, right? Maybe some of you didn't know, but this word here, it means black, or it means a Christian. Maybe some of you didn't know that being called a Christian was actually a byword, and it's actually pronounced
Strong's G 3526. Niger. Niger.
just to give you a little understanding of what you're reading. And Lucius of Cyrene and Manaen, which have been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul, as they ministered to Yahuah and fasted, the Ruach HaKodesh said, separate me, Barnabas and Saul, for the work whereunto I have called them. And when they had fasted and prayed and laid their hands on them, they sent them away. So they, being sent forth by the Ruach HaKodesh, departed unto Seleucia, and from thence they sailed to Cyprus. And when they were at Salamis, they preached the word of Elohim in the synagogue of the Yahudim, and they also had Yehuchanan to their minister. So they're going unto the isles, but they go into the synagogue of the Yahudim. Let's look at verse 13. It says, Paul and his company, I'm just going to paraphrase, they loose from Paphos. Now, Paphos is the ancient name for Cyprus, but it's also a place. It says they came to Perga and Pamphylia and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down after reading the law and the prophets. Verse 16 says, Paul stood up and said, men of Israel, and ye that fear Elohim, give audience. The Elohim of this people, Yisrael, chose our fathers. Now he's in Antioch, in Pisidia, in the synagogue on the Shabbat, calling them men of Israel and telling them Elohim chose their fathers. Like I said, Goshen Group has touched on this before in more detail in a previous lesson, but you could literally continue through Acts and the epistles, and you will notice the same thing. Paul was sent unto the isle of the Grecians to deliver the basar, or good news. And here is a thought for you. News can only be considered good if the recipient of the news has already in place an anticipation or expectation of the report. To everyone else, it is just information. So Paul was sent into the isles of the Grecians because, as I showed you earlier, the Yahudim had already been scattered amongst those isles and displaced from their land and culture. Some of them attempted to hold on to their expectation of the good report, and others did not, and were reckoned as Gentiles, Hellenists, Grecians, or to say, Greek-speaking peoples. Can you find instances where Greeks and other nations received the basar and abandoned their pagan beliefs and joined themselves to the promise? Of course you can. But the delivery and the true understanding of the basar has to always be by a Hebrew. Let's look at Acts 8. 30 through 31, it says, and Philip ran thither to him, this is Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, and heard him read the prophet Isaiah or Isaiah, and say, understandest thou what you readest, or do you understand what you're reading? And he said, how can I, except some man should guide me? And he desired Philip that he would come up and sit with him. 34, the eunuch answered Philip and said, I pray of thee, of whom speaketh the prophet this? Of himself or some other man? Then Philip opened his mouth and began at the same scripture and preached unto him Yahusha, or the basar. Romans 3, 1 through 4. What advantage then hath the Yahudi, or what profit is there of circumcision? That's another way to say, what profit is there to be a Yahudim? Much in every way, chiefly, or foremost, or first, because that unto them were committed the oracles of Elohim. For what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of Elohim without effect? It's basically saying, what if some of them didn't believe? Does their unbelief make the trust of Elohim without effect? Elohim forbid, yea, let Elohim be true, but every man a liar, as it is written, that thou mightest be justified in thy sayings, and mightest overcome when thou art judged. Now, that's literally saying that the blessings and the curses are always attached to you. There's always a way for you to turn back to the Father. You know, I didn't grow up in church, but throughout my life, I'd visited many churches of many flavors, if you would. And I'm sure most would agree that there is something drastically different with the vibe of a Hebrew church compared to other flavors. Now, a lot of what gets taught in any of those churches, most of us have come to challenge and understand to a better degree, but at its core, the soul of a Hebrew believer is much different that I have noticed than anyone else. Maybe it comes from our experience, but the joy, the pain, the anticipation of a Hebrew church and its true believers can be felt in their lives, in their songs, in their trust. Throughout the other flavors of churches and believers, I've yet to find any other like it. Not that others are not 100% committed, But I believe that depth of trust and anticipation, the ability to make one feel both their joy and their pain, has been ingrained in their DNA by Yah. Unto them were committed the oracles of Elohim. This can be attributed to the promise given to Abraham because of his faith. The faith that Abraham exuded, a lot of people may believe that it began with possibly the events in Genesis 15, but that verse is about, or that chapter is about the sealing and the cutting of the covenant promise. Some may believe it began with the excursion to Mount Moriah and Yitzhak, but it actually begins in Genesis 12. Now, faith in Hebrew is amun or imunah, and it means established or trustworthiness. And this trustworthiness is exhibited by one to Yah by their actions or works. Their ability to receive a command and carry it out. It is not simply belief void of actions like the Western mindset would think of it. Genesis 12, 1 through 3, it says, Now Yahuah had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will shew thee. That's the command. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and in thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. That's the promise. Now, in Hebrew culture, in thee means that this is a promise that's continual, or a continual promise. It is made by Yah to Abraham and to all the generations that come from and are in thee. Abraham exhibits his trustworthiness in verse 4. He departed, so he carried out the command and the departing as he was instructed. This is faith. By the way, amun, which is the Hebrew word for faith, is spelled with the aleph, the mem, the uwa or wa, and the nun. It means the leader's blood secures the seed. Is it not the work of Messiah and his blood that secures you and I to the blessing? The promise is passed on from Abraham to Yitzhak, and from Yitzhak to Yaakov, and Yaakov to the 12 tribes of Yasharel. Yah chose Moses to lead his people, the children of Yasharel, out of Egypt as they came unto the wilderness of Sinai. Right before the hearing of the 10 Devarim, or the 10 Commandments, Yahuah told Moshe in Exodus 19, verse 6, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a Kodesh nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Yasharel. The expectation is for all of Israel to be priests. They were entrusted with the oracles of Elohim and expected to be a light unto all. Long before we had the ultimate example of Yahusha Ha'Mashiach being our high priest, Yahuah set forth an example to our ancestors of what it was supposed to look like, and also point us to the culmination of the promise. Speaking to Moshe, he said in Exodus 28, verse 1, take thou unto thee Aharon thy brother and his sons with him from among the children of Yasharel, that he may minister unto me in the priest office, even Aharon, Nadab, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar, Aharon's sons. Next time, we will explore what Yahuah says is the duty and the representation of a priest.